This is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Bristol Flyers Podcast, proudly presented by Matchday Live. I'm Joel Osborne. He's Sam Hardy. Sam, how's it going?
Yes, Jolie, I'm doing very well, my man. I am excited that we have had a wonderful first start of the British Super League. Funny.
You were going to say British Basketball League, weren't you?
I was, but this is exactly why I did that, to trick everyone, because remember, it's changed, Joel.
Yeah, it is the Super League, a new dawn for British basketball, and everyone's going to call it British Basketball League, but it is the Super League. Please forgive us in these first few weeks of the season. But basketball's back, Sam. Did you enjoy watching the first round of hoops on DAZN last weekend?
I had to watch it on catch-up because I was actually watching Bristol Bears versus Gloucester live in the stadium down here, which was an epic game, which annoyingly Bears lost by 3, I think, but it's still good.
Yeah, well, the Flyers also lost their game at the weekend, but it's just the first game of the season. And of course, while we're recording this podcast this week, the team right now are out in Denmark. We're actually recording this on a Tuesday, so it's the day before. They are traveling. I think they've just landed literally just now. I think I've seen on Instagram.
Ooh.
They just landed at some Lego house or something. It's like Lego. I don't know if you see it on Instagram. They everyone's taking pictures on their stories of like this like Lego dinosaur or something. I'm sure someone can tell the story when they come on the podcast.
But wasn't Lego like invented in Denmark?
Brick City, I think it's called.
Let's hope. Let's hope not.
Let's hope it's not Brick City.
Let's hope that's many a swish rather than a brick.
On Wednesday in Backen. Of course, by the time this podcast comes out, you'll know the result of the game against the Backen Bears in our opening game of the EMBL campaign.
An exciting match, actually. I know it's already happened based on the listener, but last year they came to SGS Wise, and it was a tough matchup. We lost by a few.
It was 4 points last time we played. I looked at the highlights the other day. They got a couple of returning guys from last season's squad as well.
Knudsen, is he back?
No, he's not back, not to my knowledge. But there are a couple of good players. Do you remember Skylar Bowlin?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
He was there.
Oh, he was good.
Of course, we can also talk about the DAZN deal from... Because last week when we recorded the podcast, we didn't know, because we recorded it early, we didn't know where you could watch the games. We knew.
We did know.
But we couldn't say where we could watch the games. But it is DAZN. We're going to have to do a little step-by-step guide on how you can watch your games on DAZN this season. If you didn't watch the opening game, we're going to show you later on. There you are, in the podcast. But before we do get underway with this week's episode, Sam, we've got a milestone alert.
What?
You were supposed to prepare a sound for this because it would have sounded so much better if I announced the milestone alert and then there was a sound.
No, I got the sound ready.
Sam, we got a milestone alert. Brilliant. Because the milestone for the Bristol Flyers podcast is that this is episode number 80.
Oh my goodness me, which means only one thing, Jolie.
What's that mean?
By the end of the season, we will have reached episode 100!
Episode 100 is on the way. It probably won't be till March, if my calculations are correct. Okay. But we are well on the way. If we continue doing weekly episodes like we do on all major podcast providers and YouTube, it will mean that episode number 100 will be with us in, I want to say, around March time. So we get our thinking caps on, have a think about what we want to do for our 100th episode celebration.
But I've got an idea, Joel, what we can do.
Let's hear it.
I think what we should do is like those... bear with, like those couples that propose to each other then do a bungee jump. I think we should open an episode doing a joint bungee jump together.
Nah.
Yeah.
Bungee jump.
Why would you do a bungee jump? You scared?
Where can we bungee jump in Bristol?
Clifton Suspension Bridge.
Can you do it off that?
Yes, you can.
No way.
Yes, 100% you can. In fact, that links nicely to some charity stuff going on, which we should talk about soon.
Oh, yes.
On the podcast, which includes a bungee jump.
Yes.
So we'll come back to that.
Maybe we could do that for the podcast as well, and for the Bristol Sport Foundation.
Jolie, this is an idea coming together, okay?
It's all coming together. We'll put our heads together offline. We will discuss this off air. But yes, if you've got any ideas, by the way, of what we should do for our 100th episode celebration, you can message us. hello@bristolflyers.co.uk is the email. Or you can leave a comment on YouTube. If you're watching this down here on YouTube, you can leave a comment as well. Just like Richie Van Dam did on last week's episode.
Great name.
He commented saying, "I'm glad this is back again. Thank you." No, he didn't say thank you. That's me. That's me.
You read it like Ron Burgundy.
That's me reading out the word thank you.
I'm glad Das is back again. Thank you, Richie. We are also glad to be back. Thank you, Richie. We appreciate your comment, though. We do, don't we, Joel?
Yeah, we sure do. Russ Williams also left a comment on last week's show saying, yes, glad to have you back, guys. Go Flyers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, nice.
So thanks for your comments, but do leave more. And you can leave a rating and review on all major podcast providers and YouTube, because we are back to weekly episodes for the 24-25 season. Coming up on this week's show, Sam, because the lads are all out in Denmark, about to play Back and Bears, we've got a studio guest, and it's quite a serious interview this week because we are speaking to Bristol Flyers CEO Lisa Knights. We remember last week on the podcast we spoke about the timeline of events that led to the formation of the Super League. This week, we are actually speaking to Lisa, who has been involved in the formation of the Super League. And it's a great conversation. We actually have already recorded the conversation. We're like jumping forward and backwards in time on the podcast.
We're crazy.
Yeah,
we're crazy.
We are crazy. You crazy time travelers. But I think it's important for the fans to understand sort of how much work has gone on behind the scenes in such a little amount of time. So shall we get to the interview segment of this show, Sam?
Let's do it.
Here it is. Let's hear from Bristol Flyers CEO Lisa Knights.
This is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Hi, welcome back to the Bristol Flyers Podcast, where we are very pleased to now be joined by Bristol Flyers CEO Lisa Knights. Lisa, welcome back to the Bristol Flyers Pod.
Thank you very much. Nice to be back.
A lot has gone on this summer, hasn't it?
Has it? I hadn't noticed.
Last time we had you on the podcast, you were giving us an update on Flyers at the end, sort of back end of last season. We have a lot to talk about. Last week on the pod, Sam and I talked through all the events of the summer, which has led from the BBL losing its licence to Super League being formed. And we wanted to invite you back on the show because you've been involved with the formation of the new league, because you've been representing the Flyers in the consortium of clubs that has formed this new Super League, haven't you?
I have, yeah. It's been a hectic summer. I do love it when people refer to the off-season, so to speak, and it's been anything but. I mean, as you said in the introduction, it started with the British Basketball Federation withdrawing the licence from what was the BBL. So effectively, there was no more elite professional men's playing of basketball. And it was a very, very difficult period. And actually, a lot of my colleagues of other clubs and owners got together. And obviously, there was a lot of discussions as to how we could possibly move forward. And the only way we could move forward was if there was a new company that was formed, completely set up differently to how it had been previously, and to try and win some kind of license from the British Basketball Federation, and that's what we did. We were fortunate to be approved an interim license, and that was the starting point, really.
I've got a question about this. How much would you have spoken to the BBF before, like last season, for example, the season before? Do you do that much with them, or not really?
I mean, I'm sort of relatively new. I haven't been involved in basketball for 20 plus years. I've been involved probably for about the last 5 in real terms, but much more so in the last couple of years. In the last year, I would say, 18 months, I had more and more conversations with Chris Grant, who is the chair of the BBF, and it was very apparent he was newish in as well into that role, and it was very apparent that there hadn't probably been the best working relationship on both sides to that. I come from a number of other different sports, and it's one of those things that you have to work hand in hand. If you're going to be successful at any level, grassroots and elite, you have to work hand in hand with your governing body. And it did seem that there had been perhaps traditionally various things that had gone wrong to prevent that happening, and perhaps working as best it could. So one of the things that a few of us that were sort of the newer guard, if you like, perhaps because we were coming into it with fresh eyes, it was easier for us to go, well, okay, let's extend a hand and say, how do we work better together? So I had quite a lot of conversations. I know Vaughan, the new owner of Sheffield, has had extensive conversations, but there's definitely an aspiration that it should be very much hand in hand that we step forwards into this new era.
So through the ashes of the British Basketball League, you think this is actually going to be a potentially beneficial, better relationship building for these two entities?
I think they have to work hand in hand. I mean, what I find really exciting about this, and you say it is a new era, there is a completely different ownership structure. The clubs that are all involved have worked so collaboratively to try and get this started. I mean, to get a new league started in, I think it was 10 weeks last week to the media day from when we got handed the interim licence. It's just been bonkers in a good way. Organised chaos, I would say. I mean, there's just so many things that have to go on to start a league. And what has been lovely as well is the fans' reaction to the opening weekend, because I think a lot of people, for want of a better expression, have cut us a bit of slack, because I think a lot of people understand quite how much has gone on behind the scenes to try and get us to that point. And the opening weekend was always going to be difficult with numerous things and such a tight lead into the season.
Yeah, you mentioned the challenges of the last sort of 10 weeks or so. Just where does one start with forming a new league from scratch? Because there's so many things that can't happen until another step is done first, isn't there? And you guys have all come together as a group. Where do you even start with that process?
Well, the start was the licence, winning the licence and winning the trust of the BBF to be able to deliver an elite men's professional league. The next step was all of us were very, very clear that the women's game should, and we want the women's game to be an equal part of SLB. So that was the unification of that. Obviously, they're operated under two very different management boards, but actually that aspiration to work longer and better in the longer term was very much at the heart. Then it comes down to the clubs. You know, we didn't know how many clubs were even going to be in that league. There was a formation of an essential core, but of course there was the issues with Manchester, with Plymouth. Surrey was part of a management buyout. There was new ownership coming into the league. You know, there was so many things up in the air. But like I said, everyone worked together and we got to a point where the next step was really confirming how many clubs were going to be part of the league. And obviously we were all bitterly sad for our colleagues in Plymouth. You know, I know Vaughan Millett, who we appointed as the interim chairman to lead our group, because you need one funnel point, one touch point. And Vaughan was the logical person to do that as part of the new guard. And I know from first hand how hard he worked to try and get Plymouth in. But a lot of it has to be about financial sustainability, and that starts with a venue. As well, we know in Bristol, you know, to be financially sustainable, you have to have a proper venue. And that was the key to it.
Yeah. And then obviously there's things that people don't even realise, like starting a company, like building operational rules, hiring staff, and all of this stuff has to be done in a very, very short amount of time. It's amazing how it's all come together so quickly.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have spent a lot of very late nights and a lot of early mornings trying to get all the documented, like you say, operating rules. You know, it was starting a company from fresh, because there was a very clear mandate from all of us that of how we wanted this to be run. And I think it was that divide and conquer. So there was everyone in a group, as you would always have. There's always in a group people with different skill sets. So there was different people with different skill sets that naturally went into different committees, and they led, and everyone basically trusts the recommendation of each organising committee for each department. So franchises, governance, strategy, commercial, broadcast, all of those areas were basically divided with 3 or so owners on each one. There was a lot of overlap as well. But that was ostensibly how it was set up, and that was the only way that we could actually get through the monumental task of starting a new league up in time.
So let's take it back all the way to when that licence was revoked. Do you remember how those conversations first came out between clubs? Like how did they first come about as to we're going to start a consortium now and we're going to come together and put together a bid to be rewarded a new licence?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to say I can't remember, because I wasn't a part of it, because obviously I was sitting on the BBL board at the time. The first notification we had was a letter from Chris Grant on the board saying your licence has been revoked. So for very obvious reasons, I wasn't a part of any of those conversations. But at that point, I think Steve Timmon and I, who were both the club elected directors that sat on that board at the time, were very clear that there was no more, for the future of our clubs, there was no more future as part of the BBL, because the BBF had revoked the licence, and that was in their power to do that, and we had to abide by that decision.
And how often do these clubs come together? Because through the summer we hadn't really seen this kind of collaboration between clubs, not in my 10 years of working with Flyers at that senior level, but the collaboration between clubs. How often were you on these calls? How often were teams getting together and talking about what the next steps would be and how to get basketball back up and running?
I think all of us have probably spoken almost every day. At some point there has been a conversation every single day throughout the early days, certainly when Steve and I resigned from the BBL board, and then were free to be able to be part of discussions. I mean, the last 5-6 weeks have been every single day of my life. Not that my overall job doesn't mean that I constantly do with SLB and Flyers, but I have at some point had conversations with regards to whatever it was that we were trying to deal with at the time, be it broadcast, be it contracts, be it reviewing operating rules. There has been a lot of work by everyone. I mean, Vaughan Millett spoke at the media day last week in his interviews, and he said, never did he think he was signing up for this role. But, I mean, he's been fantastic, and thank goodness he did. As the principal now owner of Sheffield, he has come in uniquely skilled as well. I think there was an interview last week with him talking about, well, what's your background in sport? And he was like, well, I'm an avid sports fan, but I've never run a sports team. But actually his skill set, he was being pretty humble, because actually his skill set of setting up, being entrepreneurial, setting up entertainment companies, actually firefighting and dealing with a million different problems in one day has been in his toolbox for the last 15-20 years. So he's been perfectly placed to do that. But it was one of those, we elected him as interim chairman, and it was a bit like, oh, it's me, was his response. But he's been outstanding, and everyone else that's put so much time into trying to get these deals done. I mean, like you say, everyone has come together.
Has there been any, I know the answer, you're going to say you're not allowed to say or no, but has there been any juicy arguments between,
No, I can genuinely say there has been not one argument. I think everyone entered it, and I'm like, I am an eternal optimist about things, and I always think there's a way through something. And normally the way through is by grinding people down. No, is by talking to people and understanding people's points of view on something, and having if you start from that point of a willingness to listen, then I normally think anything is achievable. And that goes across the board, between clubs. Steve Timney was talking about the fact that, on the court, we should all be fierce rivals. Off the court, we should all be friends, because we will all rise together. The stronger our clubs are, the stronger the league will be. And the same with the BBF as well. The stronger that we perform, the better we can be, the better partners we can be to serve the federation as well.
Yeah. I imagine in a lot of these conversations, you've had to make a lot of decisions that there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, we have to go with that, or we have to go with that. And has that been more challenging than the ones that sort of had more obvious answers, or does that make sense? I don't really know.
No, I mean, I think there's been a lot of debate around key decisions, but it was trust in the process. We elected various different people who had skill sets. Sarah Bakovich was on the commercial committee. She's hugely experienced, talented. She's trained as a lawyer. She there's been certain people that you look at. Kevin Routledge from Leicester, he's been part of the league for so long. Paul Blake, been a part of the league for so long. In terms of their skill set and insight, it's been hugely beneficial having them involved. And then Steve Timney, who's someone who's a relatively new owner, coming in and saying, well, I've just built this arena here. I think we should have a concentrated focus on how we build arenas. Should we open up a toolbook for how you build an arena and what we need from basketball arena? All of that sort of stuff, and that willingness to collaborate, that sort of coming back to that central tenet of we can be on court, we can be competitive, but off court we rise together.
I think that's really good, because as we've seen the league got 9 teams now. We want to see it grow at some point, but there's going to be teams who haven't ever experienced it on this level before, that actually, if you've got that sort of information shared, you can almost help bring them up quicker and better than before. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think what we've noticed is, like I said, I haven't been a part of the previous leagues for decades, but what I have felt very keenly is the new ownership piece that's come in and that has really injected, some vitality and skill sets that we perhaps haven't had before. With SDS buying Cheshire, there's a whole skill set that has come into Cheshire, which has been so impressive. And Denise, I've worked alongside on the board with, she is so impressive with her ideas and her experience from across the pond and the work that she's done there. We've then got in terms of coming into Manchester. I mean, again, another late, that deal was quite late in terms of, you were talking about what was the order, securing the franchises that were at risk was probably the next stage, because then we could confirm the fixture schedule. But the Manchester ownership, that has been really interesting to watch that play out, and they've been involved in terms of, where the league starts to go from here, but the input that they could have. And then you've got the likes of Jodie and Dan from Surrey, that have transformed, gone through a whole rebrand, the Surrey 89ers, and is now under the stewardship of two people that were involved with the previous club, but have taken it on and are really trying to, galvanise the investment into Surrey.
And in terms of the funding, the startup costs that are involved to start essentially a new business from scratch, am I right in thinking that all the clubs have had to pull together to create this, so everyone's buying into this new vision?
Yeah, everyone has collectively bought into the SLB, and in terms of the process, once that was established, we put forward an executive board with an interim chair to try and just make it less unwieldy, if you like. But the transparency between the ownerships, there's a WhatsApp chat, there's emails. I mean, everyone has full line of sight of what's going on. Most of the time. Some of the time you can't because of contractual discussions, but actually what's been really nice is everyone has trusted everyone who's in their respective group to do the best they could for the league, and that has very much played out.
I think that's really important, because we want to see these rivalries, we want to see teams battle against each other, but actually surely if everyone works really well together, the best sort of like performance and on and off the court will happen, but also we'll see like sort of the most beautiful basketball, the best players coming in, because it's a more attractive league. Do you know what I mean?
And it's all about growing the game as well. I mean, like you say, we are competitors on the court, and it's probably going to feel quite strange from your point of view, Lisa, actually playing against Surrey this weekend, for example, because you've worked so closely with Jodie and Dan throughout the whole off-season.
Yeah, I mean, a few of us have said that it's going to be really weird. When we all got together for the media day last week, we all sort of said, everyone greeted each other like long-lost friends, because we've sort of, when you've been through something together that's been hugely difficult, it is quite a bonding experience. So yeah, that is going to be, but as you know, no one's going to need me for basketball insight knowledge of picking the starting five or debating that. So I will leave that to the on-court, rightly so. But yeah, it will be. I mean, obviously, I hope we beat them, but...
So do we all.
But going back to your points, the investment in the clubs, what is so critical is that all of the clubs are financially stable, and as we all rise, then the on-court stuff, right, will improve, because we've all got gradually, if we attract more funding, then that filters back into not just the grassroots player development and academy levels, but also the performance on the court.
What's been so nice to see as well, I know we've only had one weekend of actual games so far, but it doesn't look like this has caused many issues with like recruitment, because there are some unreal players throughout the whole league that I'm really excited to see this season. So yeah.
And also you've got to bear in mind that all this is going on at the same time while a lot of these clubs are trying to recruit, put together teams, run their own businesses, and also everyone's representing each of the clubs and forming this new league as well. I can imagine doing two things at once, and a lot of club situations can be a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, everyone's had to build rosters and stuff whilst all this has been going on, and trust the process that it was going to come good. I mean, I think from having seen and talked to the other owners over the last couple of days on sort of digesting on how the weekend went, everyone feels the standard and level is just as high as it's ever been, if not higher, and actually it will be much more competitive this year. Yeah. Which, we're all looking forward to.
Well, anyone can win. It looks like literally there's so many teams that can win, isn't there?
Yeah.
So.
It does.
And the European piece is such a big part of that as well. I think that attracting talent, I think the number of clubs that have, tried to get into Europe, the NBL, the introduction of that, and playing in Europe last season, that was a definite bonus to attracting players to the UK, and yeah, let's hope it improves.
Yeah, you mentioned the media day the other week in Sheffield. We went up to Sheffield. We met all the owners. They spoke to the media. We did some photos for the season ahead, and obviously John Lansdowne came along to that media day as well. And that was the first time I think that he's met the other owners face to face, and it's really great to see him more involved with basketball at this level and really come together and buy into this vision as well.
Yeah, well, he comes to the Flyers games very, most of the time he's at all the home games, and he loves his basketball. He loves his football and his rugby, but he does love his basketball as well. He comes with the kids, and actually he'd heard so much of, obviously, I'd appraised him all the way through of what was going on, because it's a serious investment on the Lansdowne family's behalf. And so he'd probably heard me talk so much about all of the different people that were involved and who we were dealing with. And yeah, when he said he wanted to come, I was like, that's great, come and meet them all. So it was nice for them to all meet each other and put names to faces. And yeah, it was a really good day, a really positive day. And, you know, pretty much everyone was represented. And yeah, it was just nice for everyone to talk about what we'd all gone through and you know, actually just take stock for the fact that last week it was just less than 10 weeks that we'd actually, you know, was the first time we'd had the interim licence approved. So to do that and even just get up and running for this weekend that's just gone was a huge achievement.
Yeah. You mentioned investors. Obviously, it's 9 teams at launch for the Super League. Do you feel like there's interest from new investors, new teams potentially on the horizon? What does the future look like for Super League?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole franchise committee and a franchise strategy that's being done and is a work in progress. The good news is there is a lot of interest. You know, for whatever reason, there has been such a spotlight on basketball over the summer that actually it has generated a lot of interest. Also, the other side of the pond. So there is a very much an aspiration and something we discuss with the BBF as well is what does that look like? What we don't want to do is do something that's unsustainable. So we have to grow in good, sustainable, you know, a strategic approach to what franchises come in next. But, you know, I think we're very clear that it will soon expand to, you know, 9, 11, 12, 15. You know, it's not going to go from 9 to 20 by next summer. But the aspiration is to grow it sustainably and to do it with good investment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the due diligence part is probably more to the fore now than ever before, considering where the league was sort of last season. I imagine, you know, the reason why we haven't seen maybe new teams come in straight away is because there needs to be a lot of due diligence done for these new franchises coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at what was happening with London Lions, you know, that's the obvious one that was being talked about over the summer. And there had to be a process. They had to run a process to make sure that they were the right owners that were coming in. Of course, Zalgiris have got a huge reputation in European basketball, so it made that job somewhat easier. But yeah, absolutely, that's something that has to be done. And you talk about investment into the league or clubs. Vaughan spoke in one of his interviews last week. He was asked that question about, you know, investment into the league, and actually the very clear focus is investment into the clubs, because through the investment in clubs, the league will grow. I think that is the tack and the strategic approach that is being taken.
I disagree. I don't think you guys have worked hard enough. I want to see 20 teams in this league this time next year, or, I don't know, I was going to say I quit, but I don't want to quit. So.
Brilliant. One of the things that was kind of raised quite a lot with fans over the off season, especially from a Super League point of view. And obviously, I know you and I both, our backgrounds are communications, and that there was a lot of not to say complaints, but a lot of fans were
complaints.
But fans weren't happy with the lack of communication coming from the league, and obviously there's some reasons behind why there wasn't communication behind what was going on this summer. But what are you allowed to tell us right now?
You know from working alongside me how much it upsets me when people say, oh, the communication wasn't good enough. You know, very often, most fans understand that very often there are certain things that you cannot talk about. I would like to say that this summer has to be the absolute exception in my experience of times where you just couldn't say anything. And for all of the reasons that were going on around and swirling around the league. The other piece was the league was being started from afresh and had no staff, you know, other than the owners. There was no staff in this new business. So actually all of us were running, you know, I was on a comms committee with Jodie, Sarah Bakovich, myself, James from Cheshire. And it was literally owners trying to get us up and running. There is very much a hope that the way that the league communicates now that we're up and running will be much more transparent. I mean, there's always going to be times, you know, when there's broadcast deals or commercial deals or contracts that you're not going to be able to say. And I think most fans understand that, or certainly any that work in commercial sectors or business sectors will understand that at times you just can't say anything. It isn't because we don't want to, it's because you can't. But I hope now that we're up and running, the thing that we had in the summer was very much this domino effect of everything was dependent on a series of things happening. So you couldn't talk about any one thing, because then that would say how many teams were involved, or what the franchises looked like, or what the fixture schedule looked like. It was so dependent on so many different factors. But now we are through that. And we hope to be able to communicate a lot better with fans going forwards.
Yeah. And it's even just simple things like You say you had no staff. Like, most people have to like hand in a notice and then like you have to recruit and all the rest of it. Like, you've had 10 weeks. That's normally what a normal hiring process would take, just one person, isn't it? So it is baffling, isn't it? It's wild.
It's amazing how it's all come together so quickly. And you mentioned the commercial, the broadcast deals that have been announced by the Super League so far, likes of Reebok, DAZN coming on board. And how have these partnerships been able to come to life so quickly?
They've I'll talk about the DAZN one. I mean, that was, I sat on that committee, the broadcast committee, alongside Paul Blake from Newcastle, Yuri from Sheffield, Steve Timoney was alongside me as well. That came from a starting point of what did we want to do. You know, there was a lot made of the television coverage that was done last year, and there was some great innovations that were made, and there was investment to try and take it to a new level. All of us keep using the word sustainable. It has to be sustainable and sustainable investment. And we wanted to select a broadcast partner and production partners that were going to grow with us. And, we knew that this opening weekend that's just gone was never going to be perfect because, the production company partners that we've just announced this week, they were appointed formally 2 weeks ago, I think it was. I'm losing track of my dates, but a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So to get any sort of output out this weekend, and what's been lovely is how the fans have reacted to that and the Reebok. We've had the difficulty with kit arriving in time. They were just such impossibly tight lead-in times. Now, that willingness to cut us a bit of slack, if you like, is only going to go so far. We've had exceptional circumstances. Going forwards, we hope that everything is going to build and work seamlessly. Next summer, we will not be in this situation. The broadcast deal was basically we went out to broadcasters to assess what interest there was. And what was really nice was there was a lot of interest. But what we selected and what we found with DAZN was they were really committed from the opening conversations. Every single conversation I've had with them, or Vaughan's had with them, or anyone in our group has had with them, is how can we... They were always looking at, there's a sporting term, how do you do extras? I don't know how many times I say to my kids, the champions do extras. That is what it felt like from the opening conversations with DAZN was... Every single time they said, what more can we do? You've seen from the social collaborations that they've done over the weekend, every time they want to do a collab on socials with us, with content, coming up with ideas alongside our production partners. That was really refreshing, because it was the first time we really felt like someone was saying to us, and that's not to, do down the broadcast coverage that we've had. Sky is a phenomenal broadcaster and partner. But in terms of constantly being honest with effectively what is quite a small sport in the roster of television broadcast, having someone really engaged and really on it saying, what more can we do? Really summed up the passion for what we were trying to do. And that's what's been really rewarding with DAZN. And I think broadly, the fans have really liked the fact that there is just one single home. There is one sporting home for basketball now, and that is on DAZN. And to be partnering alongside, the Italian league, the French league partnered with them in the summer, two very strong professional European leagues. And if you're watching those leagues, you're getting served our content. So it just suddenly multiplies and amplifies your audience in one place, and you can watch it for free anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and if you haven't signed up for DAZN yet, it's a completely free account you can do, by the way. We'll explain it later on in the podcast, won't we, Sam?
Yeah, we will.
When we finish this interview. But Lisa, just to sort of wrap things up on this segment of the show, talk to us about what the future for SLB looks like. Of course, it's an interim 3-year licence. What needs to be put in place now to enable that licence to be extended going forwards?
Well, that's where the conversations now resume with Chris Grant and the BBF in terms of just getting them to a point. They've got to run a process. It's right that they run a process. It's a huge responsibility to have the ability to revoke or award an elite professional sporting league. And they take that job very, very seriously, and so they should. The key to all of it has to be the clubs, because without the clubs, you haven't got a league, and without your BBF, you haven't got a league. So it has to be that hand-in-hand process, and really we've got to win them over with, it's ours to lose. If we've got this sort of level of ownership and investment and the facilities plan as well, the venues, obviously with Bristol, our hoped-for arena that should be coming online at some point soon in the next few years. Caledonia have, put huge investment. You can't look to grow a league without investors knowing that they've got that surety of a 20-year license, for example. So that's the next step, is those conversations, and Chris Grant and the BBF will run a proper process as to who wins that. But we hope that we're in a really strong position and have demonstrated what we can do by working all together.
Lisa, that's a great place for us to wrap up this segment of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here, as always. I know it's been a busy summer, but fingers crossed things will get a little bit more manageable, and now we can focus back to the Flyers season ahead.
Let's go Flyers.
This is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Well, there you have it. That's our interview segment with Lisa Knights, Bristol Flyers CEO. Sam, great chat that was.
Great chat, and as great as that was, we promise we will be having all the players come on very soon. It's just been a really busy schedule at the beginning. They'll be starting up with us next week, won't they, Jolie?
Yeah, because they're obviously all in Denmark right now, so we've managed to get a guest from the club. But when they're back, I do think next week we are going to have at least one player, maybe two, on the show. And also, we want to do this 20th anniversary edition episode of the podcast where we speak to former players. So maybe next time we're away on the road for EMBL, we get a former player in the house, or maybe even on the phone, to have a chat with us about their time with the club and reminisce on Flyers basketball to celebrate 20 years of Bristol Flyers. So watch this space. But it's a great chat with Lisa Knight. It's good to hear about all the hard work that's being done behind the scenes. Obviously, some things we can't talk about, which is very understandable. But the thing to remember, Sam, is the league is up and running. We've had one weekend in the bag. And yeah, we've got top flight basketball back in Bristol, which is great to see.
Very happy. Very excited.
Snaps, snaps, snaps for top flight basketball. Should we get to the news, shall we? It's time for us to get to the news!
You're listening to the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
All right, so here's a look at what's been going on around the league this past week. Let's start by getting the brush out and just sweeping away what happened on Friday night.
Okay, done.
We got to talk about it, I think. Flyers Trophy campaign got off to a tough start. 91-69 away in Leicester on the opening night of the 24-25 Super League season. Not the way we would have wanted to start life in the SLB.
We couldn't shoot. The three-point percentage wasn't great either, but there were two monstrous blocks by two of our boys.
Oh, yeah,
as well.
Kendall Lewis and Damon Robertson. Block party out there, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know which one I prefer because they were both amazing. I think K-Lou made the SLB top 10 plays of the week, didn't it?
Yeah, he did indeed. Yeah. Let's take this game back to the start then. Leicester, they opened with a 12-0 run. That kind of created the separation that we didn't really come back from. I think it got down to 6 at one point in the game. It sort of stretched out to 20-odd at one point in the game. But that was the game really there, just that start that they had, and then we were just playing catch-up the whole way through, right?
Do you know what? Zach Jackson, who used to play for Riders 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago, is back. He looks bigger, and I mean in terms of he's put on some good weight, and he just played unreal, didn't he, Joel? Shot really well, made some annoying daggers down the line a little bit, which sort of took it out of reach for us, didn't it?
Yeah, certainly did. Trey Tennyson, Owen McCormack hit threes in the first. Leicester led 23-15 after one. Damon Robinson hit a three to cut it back to single digits. Sort of the lead was swinging back and forth. But it seemed like everything that we did, Leicester had a response for in the game. And then Riders sort of pushed it out to 19 in the third. And then it finished 22-point win for Leicester. Trey Tennyson, Flyers leading scorer, 15 points. Owen McCormack, 12 off the bench on 2 for 4 from 3. Damon Robinson and Evan Walsh, both 11 points apiece. It means that we are 0-1 in our Super League campaign so far, but we do return home this Saturday, and there's still a few tickets available for the visit of Surrey 89ers.
The one thing I like about this, the change form, well, there's a lot of things I like and whatever, but a good thing about it is we lost the first one, but we're still in it. We've still got a chance to get through to the playoffs in the SLB, and like we say, anyone can win this year. And when I mean the playoffs, I mean the
semi-finals.
The semi-finals, yeah. You know what it is.
The way it works is actually quite beneficial to us because we're only in a 4-team group compared to the North, which is 5 teams. If you win like your home games and win 1, maybe 2 away games, that puts you in a great chance to qualify. So obviously, the home court advantage is crucial come this Saturday when the Surrey Niners visit SGS. Tickets are still on sale, down to our last few ones, so make sure you go snap them up but before they sell out. Also, make sure you grab your tickets to go see Flyers against German Bundesliga side Bamberg on Wednesday, October 16th. Flyers v Bamberg Baskets in probably one of the biggest opponents that the Flyers have ever hosted, Sam, at the SGS College Arena. German Bundesliga side coming to SGS.
I mean, that is exciting, isn't it?
It's huge. Former players that have played for Bamberg include Justin Gray. Remember Justin Gray?
Yeah.
Zach Copeland. Remember Zach Copeland?
Uh-huh.
Both played for Bamberg last season, both not playing for Bamberg this season, so it won't be a reunion against them, but a huge team from one of the top 5 leagues in Europe coming to tiny little SGS in front of a 750 crowd.
Well, VJ King went to Bundesliga last year as well, didn't he?
He went to Hamburg.
Yeah. Not Bamberg, Hamburg.
He went to Hamburg Towers, but he's not there. I think he's playing in Serie A right now, VJ King.
Oh,
I think you can watch him on DAZN, because Serie A is on DAZN as well, so have a little look for that.
We've got to get onto DAZN at some point, don't we?
Well, should we get onto it now? Because we mentioned it in the interview segment with Lisa Knights. The Super League's broadcast deal with DAZN was officially announced, with all games to be aired for free to audiences worldwide.
When I first saw it written down, I saw it before anyone had ever said it to me. I would not have guessed DAZN, Joel.
I'll tell you what, like, it's such a big name, and you look at, like, they got the boxing on there. They're huge in the world of boxing. Basketball Champions League with Courtside 1891. They have all the Champions League basketball games are on there. The Italian Serie A is on there now. There's football. There's women's football.
Women's Champions League on there, isn't it?
Champions League. There's the there's NFL on there. Of course there is, producer Fred. Thank you for the shout out. So go, it's a great place for cross marketing is what I'm trying to say. Where it's a platform where it's the home of Super League basketball, but also other sports and other basketball leagues that can also cross over. You know, you might get some fans of the Italian league might flip on some Bristol Flyers, you know, because it's all on the same platform. You know, a lot of Flyers fans might pop on some Basketball Champions League now because it's all on the same platform. It makes perfect sense.
And not only that, well, we're going to go through how you can log onto it in a second, but I've downloaded the TV app as well, so I can just get straight onto it at home as well, Jolly.
It's available. The app's available on your iPhone. It's on your iPad. There's a TV Smart app, which is the one that I watched that on as well.
Not just Apple, all the other ones as well. Android have an app.
Yeah, Android has an app as well. So you can literally watch it everywhere. DAZN DAZN is what you need to put into your app providers. But to show you how easy it is to watch games on DAZN this season, we're going to pop it up on screen right now. There it is. Thank you, producer Fred. This is what the home screen looks like when you create your free account on DAZN. Now, you'll notice at the bottom of the screen there's a few things that are live right now. Some of them have a padlock next to them. That means you need to subscribe and pay actual money to watch them. However, Super League Basketball is completely free. As producer Fred slowly scrolls down the screen there, you can see live now, upcoming. Coming up is where you'll see our Super League games when it gets closer to game day. If you scroll a bit further down the screen there, producer Fred, you will see top sports and competitions. And you look at the far right, there's basketball. Hit that, producer Fred. Here you go. This is what the basketball homepage looks like on DAZN. There's a few games that are live now. And also, you can see all the coming up basketball games that are available on DAZN. Right below that, you've got catch-up. Producer Fred is scrolling through to find our game this Saturday. And there it is! Bristol Flyers versus Surrey 89ers in the SLB Trophy. And that is where you can watch Super League Basketball and Saturday's game right on DAZN. You can also set a reminder, bottom of the screen right there, hit the bell icon, set a reminder, it sends you a notification when the game's about to start. Also, if you want it to be a bit easier to find Bristol Flyers games, you see that search button right at the top there. Search Bristol Flyers. Look at that, it's just gone in straight away. At the top there, you see the Bristol Flyers profile. Hit that follow button, producer Fred. You now get notifications every single time before Bristol Flyers play on DAZN.
Now, if you've not made a profile yet, what will happen is you'll go into the create a profile page at the start. It will ask you to enter your email, some details, your password, etc. And then as you go through, what it will do is it will say to you, pay for a monthly or pay for an annual membership, which you could do, but you don't have to do. I don't think you should do, because what you can do is you delete that, or not delete that, come out of that, refresh the page, or close the app and open it again, and you will be logged in your very own DAZN profile. Isn't that right, Jolly?
That is DAZN in a nutshell, and and we are super, super excited to be playing basketball on DAZN this season. And there you have it. That's how you watch Flyers basketball every SLB game this season. There we go. And now you're up to date with this week's news.
You're listening to the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Bristol Flyers Podcast. Sam, episode 2 of the new season in the books.
Boom. Bosh.
Did you have fun, Sam?
I always have fun with you, Jolie. I don't remember the last time I did an episode and went, well, that wasn't fun.
No, I did not have fun on this week's episode of the Flyers Podcast. It was awful.
In fact, every episode now you're going to ask me if I had fun, and I'll let them know, okay?
Did you have fun? Well, I hope the listener had fun listening to that conversation. I thought it was a very insightful conversation with Lisa, learning about all the hard work that went into building the Super League basketball this off-season, all in 10 weeks. And remember, this is a growing thing. So, you've seen things like the Reebok deal, us not wearing our current uniforms that we're supposed to be wearing. I have seen the new uniforms, and let me tell you, they're worth the wait. That's it for this week's episode of the Flyers Podcast. Don't forget, we're back on all major podcast providers and YouTube every single week. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you please share it with a friend. If you're listening on all major podcast providers, give us a rating and a review. Comment if you're watching on YouTube. Sam, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up the show?
Only that I've had fun, Jolie.
I've had fun too. So I hope you've had your week's worth of fun. We'll see you next week right here on the Bristol Flyers Podcast, powered by Matchday Live.